Private Detective Deborah was doing some shopping at the mall. Suddenly she heard people arguing. The woman went there and saw a stressed shop assistant and several people crowding him. The poor man had found a smartphone and made an announcement, and now several people claimed it was their phone. One man said the phone must have slipped from his bag. A young woman said the gadget belonged to her, and an older woman shouted it was her husband's device. That's when the phone rang. For some reason, the shop assistant handed it to Deborah. The woman glanced at the screen and immediately gave the phone to the man. How did she understand whose device it was? Deborah saw the word wife written on the screen. Emily has 2 glasses filled with water. In the first glass, the water is heated up to 100 degrees. In the second glass, the water is cooled down to minus 100 degrees. The girl drops 2 coins in the glasses at the same time. Which coin will reach the bottom faster? It'll be the coin in the glass with the warm water. The coin in the other glass won't sink at all. The water there is frozen. Jacob and his brother Jack were walking along the street. When they passed a grocery store, Jacob pointed at a young woman and exclaimed, "Oh, my niece is over there." His brother answered, "Oh, right, but it's not my niece." "How come?" The young woman is Jack's daughter. Ashley had a boyfriend, Mark, who was madly in love with her. Unfortunately, the woman didn't love him back. Once, she decided to leave him. Ashley knew Mark wouldn't let her go easily, so she ran away. But Mark was a very rich man and could find her almost anywhere. She had to be careful. 1 week later, Ashley was sitting in her hotel room when she heard a knock at the door. When the woman opened the door, she saw a man. She had never met him before. The stranger apologized. "Oops, I'm sorry, my bad. I was sure it was my room." He then turned around, went down the corridor, and disappeared in the elevator. Ashley rushed back into her room and started to pack her things. She instantly knew Mark had found her. How did she figure it out? No one will knock on their own hotel room door. It was Mark's man who was looking for her. The faster you run, the harder it is to catch this thing. What is it? It's your breath. David and his wife Jessica moved to another town. The place wasn't big. For the locals, new people coming to live there was a big deal. That's why, the next day, the couple's curious neighbors came to say hello. Karen introduced herself and said she was sure they'd become great friends. She had even cooked cupcakes for David and Jessica. Elderly Mrs. Latham told the newcomer she'd been living in the town for almost 80 years. Betty was extremely excited. "A man's come to live in our small town. And so good-looking at that. Awesome news." 2 of the neighbors seemed a bit creepy, and only one looked normal. Who was it? Karen had decorated her cupcakes with something that looked suspiciously like eyes. Betty is too enthusiastic about David. As for Mrs. Latham, she is sure to know lots of things about the town and its inhabitants. She can be a useful source of information, and she cooked them some soup. Brandon's wife told him to cook several eggs, but the man had to boil them for exactly 2 minutes. She left her husband 3 hourglass timers for 3, 4, and 5 minutes. How can the man boil the eggs for exactly 2 minutes? Brandon waited until the water started to boil. Then he turned over the 3 and 5 minute timers. When the 3-minute timer ran out, he dropped the eggs into the water. And when the 5-minute timer ran out, he had his perfectly boiled eggs. It was the first time Eric sailed his brand new yacht. But the man seemed to be out of luck that day. A bad storm sank the yacht, and Eric hardly had any time to make it to the surface. Half conscious, he ended up on some beach. In the morning, the man realized he was stranded on a tiny, uninhabited island. No radio, no cell phone, no means of communication whatsoever, and the island had no trees to make a smoke signal. On the third day, Eric noticed a small plane circling in the sky over the island. Were they searching for him? But the aircraft was flying too high, and the pilot couldn't see Eric. And still, the man did something, and soon he was picked up by a rescue helicopter. How did he attract the pilot's attention? Eric picked up some stones and used them to write SOS on the sand. Helen lives in Singapore with her husband Dennis. Once, she tells her husband she wants to visit her aunt who lives in Italy. Dennis doesn't mind, but he asks his wife to send him a photo as soon as she gets to Europe. When Helen lands in Rome, she sends Dennis a selfie. Under the picture, she writes, "Ciao from Italy, I've just arrived." After looking at the photo, Dennis realizes his wife lied to him. How did he know? In the picture, the clock on the wall shows exactly the same time as the clock in the kitchen, which is in Singapore. If Helen was in Rome, the clock would show a big time difference. One day, Christopher decided he had to develop his logical thinking skills. The guy found a tutor and started visiting him to have private lessons. But this teacher had one interesting habit. Closer to the end of each lesson, he always gave Christopher several riddles. The guy wasn't allowed to go home until he solved them. This Friday, the first riddle went like this. How can you make 6 into an odd number? Tricky. How? He removed the letter S and got IX. That's 9 in Roman numerals. But the guy knew it was just the beginning. The next riddle was even more difficult. It's thin, but when water splashes it, none seeps through. When hit, it changes color. It covers an incredibly complex thing, yet it's very easy to flex. What is it? At first, Christopher didn't have any idea. Duh, he'd have to stay and crack riddles till midnight. Luckily, in a moment, it dawned on him. It's the skin. Christopher's tutor was impressed with the guy's progress. "Okay," he said, "one more riddle and you can go home." 3 doctors said that Ryan was their brother, but Ryan claimed he didn't have any brothers. Who was lying? Christopher figured out right away that everyone was telling the truth. All the doctors were Ryan's sisters. Whew, he could finally go home. The morning after a heavy snowfall, Justin went outside and stopped in his tracks. He saw there was twice as much snow on top of his garage as there was on his neighbor's. Still, Justin didn't get surprised or upset. Why? Justin's garage is twice as big as his neighbor's. No wonder it also has twice as much snow. Amy went on holiday to the seaside and met 3 guys there. They were friends, but it didn't stop all of them from trying to impress the girl. In the evening, they all met in a restaurant to have dinner, and the guys started to tell Amy about their adventures. Sam boasted, "I'm a pilot, and I've already traveled all over the world." Larry said, "I once took part in an expedition to the North Pole. It was amazing. I saw penguins and polar bears." Jerry barged in, "And I'm an astronaut. When I was in space last time, I went on a spacewalk. I wanted to see our planet from above, but I was almost blown away by a strong wind." Who's lying to make a better impression? Both Larry and Jerry are lying. Penguins live near the South Pole, and there's no wind in outer space. It's an almost perfect vacuum. Andrew and Gary are twins. They were born just 1 minute apart, and Andrew is the elder of the two. But for some mysterious reason, they celebrate their birthdays 2 days apart once every several years. How is this possible? Andrew was born at 11:59 p.m. on February 28. It wasn't a leap year. So Gary, who appeared just 1 minute later, was already born on March 1st. That's why, during leap years, they have 2 days between their birthdays. A famous scientist went missing. The last time his colleagues saw him, he was in his laboratory. When the police arrived, they found a calendar lying on the man's table. There were several numbers written in pencil at the bottom: 6, 4, 9, 10, 11. The police officers had 5 suspects: David, Sarah, Jason, Betty, and Kevin. Who is behind the scientist's disappearance? It's Jason. The numbers stand for months, and the first letter of each month spells the name of the criminal. So the 6th month is June, and the first letter of June is J. The 4th month is April, and the first letter of April is A, and so on. Smarty pants. So Dave had to sneak into his mom's computer to delete some emails he accidentally sent her. His mom had a bad memory, so she always had notes with her passcodes. Luckily, the note was right there again, saying 9868. Dave entered the passcode, but it was wrong. Why? And what's the actual passcode? The note was just turned upside down. The actual passcode is 8986. Stephanie came home after a long day at work. She was very excited to finally eat her favorite chocolate she had been dreaming about all day. But the chocolate was gone. Stephanie interrogated each of her family members. Her husband said, "I just got home from work too and haven't eaten anything all day." Her daughter Della said, "I was studying all day and didn't eat anything too." Della's twin brother Arnie said, "It wasn't me." Who ate the chocolate? Take a closer look at Della's desk. There's a chocolate wrapper, but she said she didn't eat anything. She must have lied. A grocery store manager noticed that recently they started to lose watermelons. He suggested that there's a watermelon thief coming at the store from time to time. He opened one of the security videos and could immediately tell who the thief was. Look at the picture and try to guess who is the culprit. Look at the guy in the middle. He has a ball in his hands, but he's holding it like it's very heavy. Usually, balls aren't heavy, so it must be a watermelon. Tom and Mark came to the job audition. The company doesn't want to hire parents because they need full commitment. Both men said that they're not parents, but one of them is lying. Can you tell who? It's Mark. Take a closer look at his hand. There's a pink scrunchie on it. He must have done his daughter's hair before the audition. Mrs. Smith invited her neighbors over for a fancy dinner. She used her best tea set and silver cutlery and cooked a great meal. However, during the dinner, she realized that one of her neighbors is a vampire. Who is the vampire, and how did she understand it? The vampire is the one who brought his own plastic spoon and is eating with it instead of with Mrs. Smith's silver cutlery. That's because vampires are afraid of silver. 4 friends met after the summer break and talked about how their summer went. Toby was bragging about the months he spent in Chile and how hot it was there. However, his friends didn't believe him and called him a liar. Why? Chile is located in the southern hemisphere. During the summertime, it's winter there. Toby said it was hot, which can't be true. Three friends, Blair, Chloe, and Nell, were walking all day around town. They found a beautiful but dusty house where no one lived. They entered it and started to take pictures. In the evening, they were scrolling through the pictures and one of them made a scream. Take a look at the photos and say which one scared them and why. It's the first picture. There was no one in the house except for the girls, but on that picture, they're all three of them together, snapped from behind. Michelle was having a birthday party. She noticed her brother was eating in his room with some girl. However, she didn't know who it was. She got very curious, so after they left, she sneaked into his room to find some hints. There were three girls at her party: Jasmine, Sydney, and Nicole. Michelle immediately guessed who her brother was dating. Can you? Her brother was dating Jasmine. Look at the dishes and the cutlery. There's a lipstick stain on the fork. Jasmine is the only one wearing lipstick. Pamela is a lawyer and Samantha is a journalist. Can you guess which one of these women is a mother? Take a look at the background. On the wall behind Samantha, there's some colorful marker scribbles. She must be a mother. Gianna was getting ready for her date. Suddenly, the lights in her apartment went off. She was almost ready and only needed her gloves. It was dark and she couldn't find a fitted pair. She only had gloves of two colors, brown and black. She was already late, so she decided to leave, taking several gloves with her. How many gloves should she take with her to be sure there's a pair of the same color? She just needs 3. Even if the first 2 are of a different color, the third one will either be black or brown, matching the other one. A police officer was following a robber around the city. Suddenly, the robber entered the hospital and disappeared. When the police officer entered the building, there were 3 workers. One of them must be a robber who dressed up to pretend to be a doctor. Can you tell who? It's the man in the middle. Look at his badge. There's a picture of a woman on it. He must have worn the first pair of clothes he noticed. It was Christmas morning and the whole family was home. When Bailey returned in her room after watching her show on TV, she found that someone stole all the presents she had been wrapping. She questioned every person in the house. Her mom said that she had been making dinner. Her dad said he had been mowing the lawn. Her brother said he had been playing video games in his room. Who stole the presents? It was Bailey's dad. It's winter, and we could see that it's snowing outside. He just couldn't mow the lawn. In the Arts Museum, the lights went off for a couple of minutes. When they came back on, the most expensive painting was missing. The detective arrived and started the investigation. There were 3 suspects, and he questioned each of them. Jessica, a dance teacher, said that she had been so scared when the lights went off that she couldn't even move and for sure didn't touch anything. Derek, a journalist, said he'd been in the bathroom at the time. Collins, an engineer, said he had been in a different room of the museum, watching the dinosaur fossil. Who's lying? It's Collins. It's an art museum. There are no dinosaur exhibitions. Can you tell who's not a real werewolf? It's actually the guy who looks like a werewolf. Werewolves only turn into wolves during the time of the full moon and at night. It's daytime now, so the guy must be just wearing a costume. Esme was having a walk in the forest. After the dawn, she tried to find her way back home, but got lost. Finally, she came across a witch's house and asked her to take her home. The witch agreed to help her, but only if Esme solved her riddle. If not, she'd have to stay with the witch forever. The witch took an apple, tied a string to it, and held it. She asked Esme to cut the string in half so that the apple didn't fall down. However, Esme couldn't touch the apple or hold it. How could she do it? Esme should tie a knot in the middle of the string, make it into a loop, and then cut the apple. The time police have found out that there's a time traveler who uses the time machine more often than allowed. They tracked him and followed him to the Stone Age. Can you guess who's the time traveler? It's this guy who's wearing sneakers. Sneakers in the Stone Age? Really? Mr. Brown was robbed in the street. The culprit hit him on the right side of his head and ran away with his wallet. Mr. Brown didn't see who it was, but he noticed that the person entered a nearby hospital. When he entered, there were 3 people sitting there. Take a close look at them and tell who was the culprit. Mr. Brown was hit on the right side of his face. This means that the robber is left-handed. Look at where the bags stand next to those people. The first woman has her purse on the left side of her, which means it must have been her. For her birthday, Sienna got a beautiful hairpin. She brought it to school and showed it to her friends during lunch. Then she left for the bathroom, and when she returned, the hairpin was gone. Take a look at the pictures before and after, and tell which of her friends stole it. Look at the glass of juice of the red-haired girl. It looks like there's more juice on the later picture. No, there's not. She just put a hairpin in the glass. Mr. Green got in a car accident and spent a month in the hospital. He got amnesia and partially forgot things. He didn't have any family, and after a month, he finally returned home. He found his street, but then he realized he didn't remember which of the 2 houses was actually his. Can you guess which one it was? His house is the one where the snow is unshoveled. He spent a month in the hospital and lives alone, so no one could clean the driveway. Look at the Christmas photos of 2 families. Can you tell which family is poor? The poor family is the second one. Even though the son has a big present, the parents don't have any presents at all. They probably couldn't afford to buy presents for themselves.